In today's video, we are going to ask, why is Mr. Trump so obsessed with white South Africans? As you probably know by now, that Mr. Trump back in May, he brought in 59 white South Africans. That was to the expense of people who had already pre-approved with the previous administration, from Syria, Sudan, Somalia, and he issued an executive order stopping their coming. Before we go further, we ask that you would appreciate very much if you can subscribe to this channel, share, comment. And Mr. Trump has blocked refugees from Afghanistan, Syria, Sudan from entering the United States. And yet he fast-tracked one particular, the Afrikaners, the white South Africans. And back in May, he welcomed 59 Afrikaners to US as refugees. Who are these Afrikaners? Let's ask. Who are they? They are the descendants of the Dutch colonialists. They came to South Africa back in 1652 under the Dutch East Indian Company and colonized South Africa. In 1795 to Cape Colony, and as they tried to advance into the interior of South Africa, there was a clash between these people of Dutch descent and the British, which then resulted in what is known as the South African Boer War, which was fought between 1899 to 1992, resulted in the British victory. And then they gained control of South Africa. However, they existed side by side. The name Afrikaner from the Dutch language, which called Africans, and they developed their own version of Dutch, which is called Afrikaans. Mr. Trump says they are refugees. These 59 white South Africans, let's underscore, they are white. They are not from Sudan. They don't look like white South African. Let's ask a question. Are they really refugees? Now, let's look for the definition of who is a refugee. A refugee is a person who has been forced to leave his or her country in order to escape war, persecution, or violence.
There are many people who fit the criteria of seeking help, who are fleeing persecution. Afghans, for example, and they live in a country run by the Taliban, but they're being denied refugee status. So I'm wondering, why has such an exception been made for the Afrikaans, especially when the South African government says they're not in danger? And are you going to open up the refugee settlement program for others?
On the president's first day in office, on January 20th of this year, he issued an executive order that paused U.S. refugee programs that had been going at record levels under the prior administration and had brought in people that we were not sure had been carefully vetted for national security issues, and put a pause on the refugee admission program in general. That pause, of course, was subject from the very beginning to exceptions where it was determined that this would be in the interest of the United States. Some of the criteria are making sure that refugees did not pose any challenge to our national security and that they could be assimilated easily into our country. So the president on February 7th issued an executive order about the egregious conditions in South Africa, and all of these folks who have just come in today have been carefully vetted pursuant to our refugee standards. And whether or not the broader refugee programs for other people around the world will be lifted is still an ongoing consideration. But again, the president has recognized the dire situation of this particular group of people, and again, they went through the process.
Are these Afrikaners refugees? That's the question we are going to try and answer. White South Africans being persecuted, or is there any violence targeting them in South Africa? Do these people fit the definition of a refugee, which I've just gone through? Let's look at these mendacious reasons given by Donald Trump. These are untruthful reasons given by Donald Trump. They face violence from who? There's government land seizure. Who is seizing their land? White victims has been mistreated by majority black South Africans and government. There is genocide. These are the reasons given by Mr. Trump. Ladies and gentlemen, if there is a genocide wherever it has occurred in the world, there are a number of organizations, non-profit organizations, that tracks these activities of genocide around the world, around the globe, and record them, document them, and issue a report. I would name just two. One is Amnesty International. Another one is Catholic Commission on Justice and Peace. They do follow these issues around the globe and document it. And these two organizations, they have no single document that speaks to that there is a genocide against the South African from the South African government, sponsored by the South African government, or say from the general public, with the South African government being nonchalant, standing by the side and watching as people perpetrate acts of violence. There is no single document that speaks to that. It's only Donald Trump, who has been sitting in the United States, in Mar-a-Lago, and then in the White House, who knows that there is violence, there is genocide against white South Africans. Now, let's look at the veracity, the facts on the ground. White South Africans enjoy full government protection under the law. They are protected fully. They might even be protected better off than the majority black people. There is no police officer in South Africa who is putting his knee on the neck like what we saw in George Floyd's case in the United States. There are no white supremacists who are, in this case will be a black supremacist, following a white kid coming out of a convenience store, shoot him, kill him, and then get acquitted by a bogus court like what we saw in George Zimmerman's case. There is no evidence that speaks to that. And all those who have tried to perpetrate violence against white people like just anybody else, they've been pursued by the police officers, brought to justice, and sentenced. White South Africans are the wealthiest and economically privileged group in the entire country. Whites are only 7% population of South Africa, but they own 70% of the farming land. The entire South African economy is in the hands of the white people. Factories, mines, shopping malls, big box stores, insurance companies, Telecommunication companies, you name them, they are owned by white people. Black people in South Africa, they actually beg for jobs. Some of them, as I speak right now, they are even working as domestic workers for white folks. Right now, as I speak today, farm laborers who work on those farms, these white farms, they are black South Africans. Have white folks been victims of violence in South Africa? The answer is a resounding yes. This ties to the general violence that siege South African society. South Africa is a violent society. There is a lot of gun violence, generally speaking, in South Africa. They've murder rate that exceeds that of United States or even some of the South American countries. South Africa has a high rate of violent crimes, which affects both black and white, yellow and brown. In the first quarter of 2024 alone, there was a staggering 6,953 murders. Only 12 were white. There have been incidents of farm attacks by thugs and criminals or looting of farms and other properties, but police have pursued them and brought them to justice. Let's remind ourselves another thing. Unlike the apartheid white South African government that ruled with entirely white folks or completely white government, there are whites within the South African power structures. Right now, as I speak, 10% of South African police as I speak today is white. 20% of judges are white and 5% of those judges are white women. The Deputy Minister of Justice in South Africa under President Cyril Ramaphosa, his name is Mr. Andries Nel, N-E-L, and he's a white gentleman. Mr. Trump falsely claims that there is genocide. Are you saying Mr. Nel is signing documents to say, go and persecute my fellow white folks in South Africa? Mr. Trump, if a white person falsely claims violence, let alone genocide, unsubstantiated by anybody else, do you simply agree because he happens to share the same skin color with you? Mr. Trump alleged that white South African government intends to use 2024 law to seize the land of the white farmers. But let's read what the law says here. I have a copy of it. Appropriation Act of 2024. The law allows the government to acquire private property, including land for public purpose or in the public interest, even without the owner's consent. While the Act provides compensation in most cases, it also allows the expropriation without compensation under specific circumstances, such as when the property is not being used or poses a risk. The process involves a series of steps and safeguards for the landowner, including the right to challenge the expropriation in court. This is what the law says. These people can challenge the seizure of their land in court. Mr. Trump, do you know that these farming lands, when they were being designated back in the days under the colonial, people were being moved, given very short notice, demolish your house or whatever it is, your dwellings, wherever you are living in, and move there in a couple of days. This land has been seized. There was no compensation. They had no right to court. This law allows people to challenge this in the court of law. Before the 20% judges, whom I said that they are white people, the judges, 20%, and under Justice Mr. Andries Nel, a white South African. Let's just visit one case. Let's just bring our attention to a case, a very prominent case which happened back in 2010, almost 15 years ago. A gentleman by the name Eugene Telebranch. That's his name here, Eugene. His name is Terrebranche. That's his last name. Was murdered on his farm. This was a self-proclaimed white supremacist, a leader of a South African neo-Nazi group. He was murdered, but the murder was committed on his farm by one of his farm workers. The guy who was then sentenced to life imprisonment, his name was Chris His last name is pronounced Muhlangu. It's Muhlangu. And this guy appeared before a white judge, Mr. John Horn, and the case was prosecuted by a white prosecutor, and he was sentenced. And it was even the investigators, that the lead investigator was a white police officer, proved that this has nothing to do with his politics, but there was a pay dispute because this was a farm worker. This guy here was his farm worker. So here we are trying to prove a point that Mr. Trump, if there is anything that happens to a white man or a white person or a white woman in South Africa, it happens within the context of the violence that I said at the beginning besiege the entire South African society, and the arm of the law will reach out and deal with the case. Just like what we saw when Mr. Eugene Telebranch. This was a self-proclaimed white supremacist in South Africa, in an independent South Africa, not during the apartheid, during the era of Mandela. And the South African government says he's free, he's entitled to his own beliefs. He's entitled to his own ideology as long as it does not infringe on other people's rights. He was free to practice his own neo-Nazi doctrine and white supremacy. Now let's look at the bottom line. Mr. Trump, this is mind-boggling. This is perplexing. This is flabbergasting. Mr. Trump has assigned a greater value on white supremacy than millions of lives. This is an unequivocal affirmation of commitment to white nationalism than millions of lives, millions of Sudanese, millions of Somalis, millions of Syrians, millions of blacks in the United States who have white police officers putting their knees on their necks. Millions of black youth who are being followed by the George Zimmerman of the world. The end of apartheid in 1994 did not end the vast racial inequalities the system created. The spoils of this oppression remains very much in the possessions. Life is still good if you are a white South African. A white minority constructed for over 300 years an entrenched system of enslavement, settler colonialism, and violent racial apartheid. Trump is infected with a white supremacist mind virus, which sees blacks suffering or people of color suffering as natural and irrelevant. Mr. Trump, there is no genocide in South Africa. We thank you for watching. Please subscribe. Life is very good if you are white South African. If I were white, I would be in South Africa right now. Thank you very much.